This morning, I have nothing profound or extraordinary to share. I've been looking at what has been happening around the world, and I've been having a few thoughts, and I've just decided that I want to share them this morning. So I'll not be preaching, I'll be talking and sharing my ideas, and hopefully we can all interact and benefit from what is shared this morning. I've been looking at what has been happening in Ukraine. I'm sure all of us are aware of the situation with the war in Ukraine, and a lot of people are following it carefully. I went to the gas station this week and I heard a man ranting and raving, and he was saying that, something needs to be done about Vladimir Putin. They need to go in and remove him because the price of gas now is soaring sky high, and he blames Putin for the situation. And this is the kind of atmosphere that I hear everywhere I go. Everybody is deeply entrenched and following what is happening with this war. But what started me thinking along the lines that I want to share this morning was I was listening to a pastor on YouTube, and he was saying that all Christians around the world need to unite and rise up in opposition against Russia. He said that anybody who calls him or herself a Christian and they don't speak up and fight against Putin and try to find ways to remove him from power, he's saying that it is questionable as to whether you're a Christian or not. Now, I believe that I believe that all right. I believe that a lot of what we are hearing in the West is not the full story. And I believe that those who are accusing Vladimir Putin and putting all the blame on him, maybe not fully, perhaps they are not fully aware of the entire story. But what I found interesting was what this pastor was saying. His call for all Christians to rise up and to fight against this oppression and this tyranny that is taking place in Ukraine. I seem to be getting a lot of feedback this morning.
People, please mute your mics, please.
All right, thank you. Right, his call was for all Christians to rise up and fight against what he perceived to be the tyranny of Putin. And so I asked myself the question, should I as a child of God be lobbying and putting myself out there in opposition of this war? And I'm going to entitle my presentation this morning, When a Christian Fights. When a Christian Fights. Now, throughout history and even today, there have been a lot of things that people have fought for. There have been a lot of things that are good that people have fought for. If you go online and you research, you will find that Martin Luther King Jr. is regarded as the greatest civil rights leader in history, right? We all know who Martin Luther King was. He was a great fighter in the cause of racial justice in America. If I say the phrase, I have a dream, immediately everybody thinks of Martin Luther King Jr. He did a lot for racial equity in the States, as I said, and they have streets named after him. I think there's a hospital named after him. I think there's even a day that is dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. And the cause that he fought for, if you look at it, it was probably a just cause, right? I remember hearing my father in a discussion with a Rasta man a few years ago. And my father asked him, what is it about Haile Selassie? Why you guys worship him? What is it that you guys think is so special about him? I know why I worship Jesus. Why do you guys idolize this man, Haile Selassie? And his answer was, I still remember his answer. I was about probably 11 or 12 years old, but the answer was so mind-boggling to me. He said, Haile Selassie is the he went to the League of Nations in 1936 and he spoke out against white supremacy and he spoke up for the people of Ethiopia, and this is what makes him different from Jesus. This is what
acceptance of who God is, and yet they do good things, and so good work.
he's saying this is what makes him stand out above Jesus, above Muhammad, above Buddha. He spoke out against racial injustice in 1936, and this to him made Haile Selassie far more outstanding than anybody else. And people look up to the men who they believe fight for social issues and civil issues. The Nation of Islam, which I consider to be one of the weirdest religions around right now, they follow a man called Elijah Muhammad. And the basic tenets of Elijah Muhammad's teaching was that all white people were devils who were created specifically to oppress black people, right? Utter nonsense. But what I'm saying is that people, and even Christians, believe that fighting for certain issues makes you important and it makes you valuable, and they believe that you should fight for these issues. Another thing that people fight for, including Christians, is political change. I remember hearing of here in Jamaica, for example, the people are very tribal and they are very political, including Christians. I've seen Christians driving around at election time, fiercely campaigning, resorting even to violence sometimes for the cause of their political party. You know, I remember one of my batchmates in college told me that his mother belongs to one party and his father belongs to another party. And he says when it's election time, the tension in the house is so great that his father cannot stay at home. He packs his bag and he goes away and stays with other family members until the election is over. His parents are unable to function in the same house. And they're both Christians. And they believe that this is a just cause for a Christian to fight for. Right? The same guy asked me once, he asked me, who are you voting for? I said, I don't vote because I have no political affiliation. He said, listen, that is a criminal act. He said, you are not exercising your franchise. He said, when you don't vote on a corrupt government and you allow a corrupt government to go into power, whatever they do when they are in power, you are responsible for it because you did not add your voice to them being elected. And I said the adverse is also true. When you vote and a corrupt government goes in power, you are responsible for whatever they do. And in his mind, it is the duty of a Christian to fight to put in the right government, right? Of course, I disagreed with him. So I'm saying people fight for different things. There are many social causes that they fight for as well. There's, for example, women's lib, for equality for women, child protection, equal wages. All of these, at a superficial look, are just and fair things to fight for. If you look at the national heroes of your respective countries, I'm sure most, if not all of them, are people who have fought for civil rights, for social equity, and for improvement in society in general. And you would think a Christian should fight for racial justice. A Christian should fight for equality and fairness. And so I ask the question, when should a Christian fight? Well, let's look at what Jesus did and what Jesus said. You know, Jesus was on the earth for 33 and a half years. And when Jesus was here, coincidentally, the Jews were at that time slaves to the Romans, right? The Romans were the most cruel and oppressive race of people that have ever walked the earth, in my opinion. The Romans taxed the Jews to the teeth. A Roman could take any Jew from the street and force him to carry a load for whatever distance he chose to, right? They were hated and feared by the Jews. In fact, there were a group of people in the days of Jesus called zealots. And the sole purpose of the zealots' existence was to fight against the Romans. But I find it informative that in 33 and a half years, Jesus never once tried to overthrow the Roman government. He never once tried to incite rebellion against the injustices that he saw taking place. He never once said to them, these political leaders need to be changed and we need to do something about them. In fact, Jesus' failure to act for civil rights was one of the main reasons why many people doubted his claim that he was the Messiah, the one chosen to save Israel, because they expected him to fight to set his people free. They expected him to fight against the tyranny and the corruption of the system at that time. And Jesus seemingly turned a blind eye to all these things. So what is the attitude that Jesus expects Christians to have when it comes to these issues? Well, let me turn to a verse that is found in Matthew chapter 25, and I'm going to read from verse 37. I'm just going to read a couple of verses here. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So what Jesus is saying here is that it is our duty, it is our responsibility. Wherever we see suffering, wherever we see need around us, he's saying that Christians should never pass somebody who is in need. In fact, that is how Jesus operated. There was nobody he ever passed who was in need of his help, and he turned a blind eye to that person. In every aspect of our lives, when we see people in need, it is our duty as Christians to help. Jesus says, when you help these people, you have done it unto me. So he's not saying you should turn a blind eye to suffering, right? In fact, the second commandment says, love thy neighbor as thyself. That is Jesus' attitude. But it is a different thing to help somebody around you than to try to overturn and to change a system of oppression. Jesus never once tried to do that. And so, yes, there's a difference between Jesus and Martin Luther King Jr. There's a difference between Jesus and Elijah Muhammad and Haile Selassie and all these people who they consider to be great because of the civil actions that they took and the efforts they tried to make to change social situations. There's a huge difference. Jesus says, help all those around. But when should a Christian fight? Let me go to another verse that gives a little more insight into the attitude Jesus says we should have. In Mark chapter 12, verse 17, the Pharisees come to Jesus and they are expressing their grouse. Of course, they are trying to trick Jesus, but in the question they ask, they are also expressing their dissatisfaction and their unhappiness with the system of government. And they asked Jesus if they should pay taxes to Caesar. Mark chapter 12, verse 17. And Jesus answering said unto them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. So what is Jesus saying here? The government of the land is put in authority over you. And he's saying that you should obey as a Christian the laws that they set in place. Many of these laws are laws we don't like, right? I wasn't too happy when they passed the law that I had to wear a mask everywhere I was going, right? And there are laws here in Jamaica which I'm very unhappy with. I think they are unnecessary. I think they put extra pressure on me. They make things extra difficult and unnecessarily so. But Jesus is saying, should I rise up in opposition and try to change these systems? Should I make it my business to try to overturn the way these things are set up? Jesus says, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, right? Obey the laws of the land. Of course, he adds the second part, which I'm going to expound on a bit more. He says, give to God the things which are God's. So a Christian is expected to comply and to bend over backward and to obey those who are set in authority over him. If I say anything that you disagree with or that you are not quite sure of, please feel free to interject. So we move on. And the point I'm making is that even though Jesus saw the oppression and the things that were happening around him, he never once tried to rebel against the system and to change the system. That was not his fight. That was not what he concerned himself with doing. And Jesus expects his children to live the way he did. In fact, he lives through them. So that's natural, right? But he gets even more extreme. I remember when I was in college again, you know, there was a guy who was training to be a minister. And one day he ended up in a fight. He was in a physical fight with another guy who was not a Christian. And I remember the evening he came to worship and he was preaching. He was the one who preached. He said, they think I'm a pushover. They think things will go like this. He said, people think Christians are soft. Christians have rights too. And he said, nobody is going to take advantage of me and I just sit and take it like that. Christians have rights too. And all the members were listening and they were clapping and they were applauding and they were saying, yes, people think Christians are pushover, but it's not so. We must fight for our rights and we must stand up for ourselves. Did Jesus agree with that? Is that what a Christian should fight for? Well, let's see. Look at what Jesus says. Jesus said some things which were hard. And he said some things which cannot be abided except by his children. In Matthew chapter 5, I'll read from verse 38. So does Jesus expect me to stand up for my rights and defend myself and fight when injustice is being levied against me? Look at what Jesus said in verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him also the other. What a seemingly ridiculous and impossible thing. And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him too. That's exactly what the Romans used to do. They used to force the Jews to do things that they didn't want to do. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Now, for the child, for the person who is not a Christian and who is not a child of God, these things seem hard. But here Jesus gives us a critical idea of how a Christian should operate. Now, Jesus spoke in extremes in a lot of things he said, right? He says if a man strikes you on the right, you should turn the left and give it to him also. I'm not here saying that Jesus meant this literally, right? What Jesus was trying to portray was the attitude that his children should have, right? They should have an attitude of meekness and submission and compliance. You should be willing to be taken advantage of. You should be willing to allow people to step on you and trample over you. Jesus is saying that's the attitude a Christian should have. Not to fight for your own rights and defend yourself and rebel against the government when they say things that you do not like. This is the attitude that Jesus says his children should have. And I find it interesting what he adds a little later on. Let me find the verse here. It's verse 45 of the same chapter. Why should you do all these things? That ye may be the children of your Father, which is in heaven. Listen, the children of earth react to situations a certain way. They stand up for themselves and they stand up for their rights and they defend themselves and they rebel when something is not in their favor. That is how the children of the earth operate. Jesus says, you should operate like this, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. And he goes on and ends in verse 48 by saying, be ye therefore perfect. Why? Even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. You are representing somebody else. You are not representing yourself, right? Martin Luther King Jr. had to represent himself and his people. That was a good thing, but you represent something greater. And if you look at the life of Jesus, you will see that the exact principles that he was teaching here were evident in his own life. And we are his children. Therefore, we operate the way that he did. You know, Paul says something similar in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 21. I'm not sure how many people have ever looked at that verse, but look at what Paul says. He says, art thou called being a slave? Care not for it. But if thou mayest be made free, use it rather. What Paul is saying here is that if you are called to be a Christian, even if you are a slave, don't worry about the fact that you're a slave. Don't rebel against your master. Don't try to set yourself free. This is what Paul is saying in this verse. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me. Right? Was Paul advocating slavery? No. Again, like Jesus, he was trying to teach a principle. Christians are not on earth to fight for the things that the children of earth fight for. Christians are not here to fight for the things that the children of earth fight for, even if they seem to be fair and just and good. And Jesus shows us the attitude that we should have. And Paul shows us the attitude that we should have. I'm going to give you an example to see if I can illustrate and concretize what I'm trying to say. You know, for a few years, I was homeschooled, but for a few years, I went to public government school. And the school where I attended, my father was also a teacher there. So one day my 6th grade teacher came to class and he said, whoever is unable to recite this passage that I'm giving you, all of you will be punished tomorrow if you are unable to do so. Right? I was a very timid child, so I did not like to be punished. So I came up with a plan. I went home to my father, who was a teacher at the same school. And I said to him, Daddy, teacher says he's going to punish us tomorrow if we are unable to recite the passage. You are a teacher at the school. Please go and talk to him on my behalf so that I will escape the punishment. Right? That is the unreasonable request I made of my father. But of course, he was wiser than I was, and he sat me down and he said to me, he started reasoning with me. He said, in that classroom, your teacher is in charge. That is his jurisdiction. That is his territory. He said, if I step in and try to interfere with his rules and his laws, what I'll be doing is undermining his authority and overstepping him, and it will not be fair to him and it will not be fair to the other children. He said, what you need to do, as long as you are in his class, you comply and you compromise and you work with his rules. He said, if there's ever a situation where I think he's going to harm you, and I know he's not, but if I ever thought he was going to harm you, I would step in immediately and intervene. He said, but otherwise, Dan, he's not going to harm you. Even if he punishes you, comply with what he says, because that is his jurisdiction. It is wrong for me to step in and try to overstep. And even as a child, that principle was cemented in my mind. I'm happy to say I didn't get the punishment that day, because what I did was instead applied myself and I went and learned the passage in order to avoid the punishment. But I learned a valuable principle, and it's a similar thing with what Jesus is saying here. Think about this. All of us on this platform here this morning, we are not of this world. Think about that. Physically, our bodies are here. I am sitting here this morning, but in reality, I am not of this world. I belong to a different world. I belong to a different kingdom. I am under the jurisdiction of a different kingdom. I am only passing through here. I am a stranger here. Right? And what Jesus is saying to his servants is, you're passing through this territory, this enemy territory temporarily. What you need to do is not to stir up revolution and cause problem and try to change the systems of this world. This world is evil and it's corrupt, and it will always be that way. Nothing will change that until the everlasting kingdom is set up. But while the people of God are here sojourning on this strange land, it is not their fight, it is not their business to try to change the systems and the corrupt ways of this world. It is their duty to help their fellow men in need. Yes, it is their duty to deal with suffering wherever they see it, but not to overthrow governments and set up systems. While we are here, we obey, we comply, we give unto Caesar the things that belong to him, insofar as it is possible. And that is the principle that I see Jesus outlining here. And as I said, he himself lived by that. In fact, look at what Jesus says in John chapter 18 and verse 36, a very telling verse. It says, and Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Our kingdom is not of this world. We fight not to set up the kingdoms of this world. We belong to a different kingdom. We are from a different jurisdiction. We're only strangers who are passing through here temporarily. Hold your peace and go through, and don't try to change this world. And that's the principle that Jesus lived by. And so I go back to the question that I asked at the beginning of my presentation. When should a Christian fight? When should a Christian fight? Because there is a time when a Christian fights. I'm going to go back to the Old Testament to try to answer this question, because I see in the Bible that there are times when a Christian should and must and has to fight. I'm going to look at the example of a man who obeyed the laws of the land. He obeyed the laws of the land. He complied with what he was instructed to do. He was a calm and peaceful man, and in fact, so great was his compliance, and so great was his loyalty to the kingdom that he was a part of, that he became one of the top rulers of the land. I think he was second or third in command, right? You may have figured out by now that I'm talking about Daniel. Daniel was a man who obeyed the laws of the land. In fact, his people were slaves to the Persians. He himself was a slave. But because of the way he operated, he was able to rise in the ranks until he became one of the leading men in Persia. But now the king comes and he passes a law. You must worship no other God for 30 days but me. Now, the way the Bible phrases this verse, I find it extremely interesting. Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. I'm going to read what it says. Now, remember, Daniel is a man who complies with all the rules and the laws of the land. He doesn't upset the boat or cause any problems. People look up to him and people expect the best from him. But Daniel chapter 6, verse 10 says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Now, the part of the verse that I found most interesting was the 3 words that says, when Daniel knew. So hold on. It wasn't that Daniel was praying one day and then he heard that this law had been passed and it caught him unawares. The Bible says, when Daniel knew. So it was a deliberate and concerted and purposeful move on Daniel's part. When the information came to him that the king had passed this law, what did Daniel do? Did he decide, well, this is the law of the land, I have to obey Caesar? When Daniel knew that his God was being defied, when he knew that the laws of the land were in opposition to what his master said, the Bible says he went home. And did he, I asked myself, why didn't Daniel just close the window that evening? Why didn't he just stay in a little corner of his room that evening, in order to avoid the problem and in order not to stir them up and anger them? Why didn't he just stay in his room that night and close the windows? It seems as if he was deliberately and purposefully trying to stir up the wasp's nest and cause problems. And that is exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. Because now, when they challenge your God, and when they defy the words of your God, and when they try to dishonor him, and when they believe that their words stand above his, then it is time for the Christian to fight. Then it is time for the Christian to make trouble. and to start a war. The Bible says, when Daniel knew, my God is being challenged here. I must fight. I must show them who is king. I must show them who I serve. He went home and he opened his window wide enough for everyone to see. And just like he had done before, 3 times a day he prayed. And he made everybody know, I serve somebody who is mightier than the laws of the land. I serve somebody who is mightier than the edicts that they come up with and the authority that they wield. And he stood up and he fought for his God. That is the time a Christian fights. Not to defend himself, not for his own rights, not when injustice is being done against him, not when they are taking advantage of him, but when your God is defied and challenged. That is when a Christian must stand up and fight. And my, didn't God honor Daniel for what he did? Didn't he honor him? Ravenous, vicious, fierce, hungry lions that had not been fed. I understand that what the Persians did, they would keep the lions hungry for days. They would keep them hungry for days so that, of course, they would be far more fierce and vicious when victims were thrown to them. If they were well fed, then they would probably be less inclined to be as vicious, right? Wild beasts that had not been fed for days surrounded this man and could not touch him because he stood up for his God. And that is the time when a Christian should fight. And so no wonder Daniel was a man greatly beloved. His friends were the same. The laws of the land, again, says this image is set up. And everybody must bow down and worship. Everybody must defy the God of heaven. The strongest authority in the land, Nebuchadnezzar, had passed this law. And the question arose again, will it be Caesar or will it be God? And again, I am moved by the words that these men spoke when they were brought before Nebuchadnezzar. Just like the Bible says, when Daniel knew, look what it says about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In Daniel chapter 3 and verse 16, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. What does this phrase mean? We are not careful. It means there is no room for argument here, king. There is nothing to discuss. There is no room for compromise. When you pass a law that we should dress a certain way, we comply. When you pass a law that we should eat a certain way, we comply. When you pass a law that we should walk on a particular side of the street, we comply. But when it comes to defying our God, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. There is no room for discussion here. When our God is defied, we fight. And we cause problems, and we upset the system.
Amen.
It's necessary. But he must be number one at all times. I'm even more impressed by what they go on to say, If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And I'm saying, even to the death, when our God is defied, we stand up, and that is when a Christian fights. Even to the death, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were willing to die that day. They were willing to die that day, right? They said, even if he does not help us, we will not disobey him. There's an authority that is higher than yours and greater than yours, and we would rather die than defy that authority. And that is what a Christian is here for. To fight not for himself, not against the systems and the establishments of the world, but to fight for our God. And again, Didn't the Lord reward them? Didn't the Lord reward them? The Bible says that the furnace was so hot that even the soldiers who threw them in were killed by the heat. Can you imagine that? How hot must that fire be? That for the soldiers to approach it and throw them in, the heat killed the soldiers outside. On top of that, the ropes were burned from their hands, the ropes, but not one hair on their body was touched. How God honors those who fight for him, how he honors them. And you know, these stories, when I read them, I am moved. I am touched. So we ask ourselves the question, when should a Christian fight? The answer is clear. We fight when our God is defied. We fight when they try to challenge our God and to try to overrule and overstep him, because we realize that there is someone far greater and mightier whom we serve, and nothing and no one must take precedence over him. And when that is challenged, that is when we fight. John chapter 5 verse 44 says, how can ye believe, which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor which cometh from God only? In Samuel, I think it is, God says, them that honor me, I will honor. When we stand up for him and we fight for him and we show the world that nothing is more important than him, I am telling you, he will fight for us. He will fight for us. You know, I'm going to read one more passage, and I think this passage summarizes what I've been saying. So the apostles were in the city of Jerusalem preaching, and the authorities of the land, the Pharisees, the government, strictly forbade them to continue doing so. Now you would think that it would have been wise and prudent for these men to lay low for a while, to witness the individuals under the quiet, you know, not to stir up the boat and cause problems, because Caesar had spoken. Instead, what the apostles did was go back immediately to the same spot they had just told them not to go, deliberately picking a fight, deliberately stirring up trouble. And they started preaching again. So the authorities of the land, furious and upset, sent back for these men. Verse 27 of Acts chapter 5. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, did we not straitly command you that ye should not teach in this name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. And the answer that the apostles have gave, it is the eternal answer that covers everything that a Christian should fight for, and why a Christian should fight, and when a Christian should fight. It is the answer that we will give in a short time when the crisis breaks upon the world. Verse 29, then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. We ought to obey God rather than men. This is what the fight of the Christian boils down to. This is what will determine whether it is time for us to fight or not. When men demand that their laws and edicts be obeyed above the word of the God of heaven, then it is time for a Christian to fight, and fight fiercely and brazenly and openly and presumptuously, because the Lord will fight for you. And so As we all know, the crisis that is to come upon this world is going to be, well, we don't know exactly what it will be, but we believe and we understand that the authorities of this world are going to be set in direct opposition against the authority of God. The last great crisis that is coming upon this world will be a test where we are asked to obey the system of the world, the beast system, or obey our God. And when that time comes, the true child of God, the one who abides in him and the one who is filled with his spirit, that child of God will fight and defy and oppose Caesar if he dares to stand against our God. And when you fight for God, we have seen that he will fight for you. So I think I'm going to wrap up here this morning. I am not feeling 100% this morning. So I think I'll rest now. But in closing, I would summarize what I said by saying it is not our business, it is not our duty to fight to change this world, to change the systems of this world and the establishments of this world and the way this world is run and operated. We oppose slavery, we oppose bigotry, we oppose injustice, but our job and our duty as Christians is to fight for the cause of our God. The world will do as the world does, and the world will never change until a new world is established. Our duty is to fight for our God. So I thank you for listening this morning. I'm sorry I was a little low energy because I'm not feeling that great, but I hope that you all understood and got the point that I was trying to make. I will leave the floor open if there are any comments or questions for the next 5 minutes or so. If not, then happy Sabbath and God bless you. In fact, I should close with prayer before I open the floor. So let's just pray.